The base is dropped on a new edition of Soccer Down Here. It's a Wednesday. Very, very busy run of show today. Dylan Butler joining us from MLSsoccer.com at 9:30. Mike Conti joining us at 10 o'clock. Tom Robinson of World Football Index and the Pinnacle South American Football Podcast joining us at 10:30. Right now, we've got Jarrett Smith. We got a game to talk about from yesterday. We got other MLS stuff. We have a wide assortment of things to cover in about 24 minutes, Jared.
Yeah, so I guess let's just jump into it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll throw it out there to the floor if anybody has questions about the game yesterday. Both of us were there. We did a podcast yesterday afternoon with kind of our immediate reactions to it. It's very possible you've seen Gonzalo Pineda's comments after the game. That's posted up live on a YouTube on Atlanta United's page if you want to check that out, the full interview after the game. It's the first scrimmage of preseason. It's a situation where you're starting, a little over a week actually right at a week after your first week of practice. So you've worked on some very basic level things and you get to implement it against an opponent, the Georgia Storm. And then you get to build on it for your next test, which is coming up on Sunday against the Georgia Revolution. It was what you would expect yesterday, and didn't see anything to worry about, and saw some good things that'll, I think, make you smile going into the rest of preseason.
Yeah, I guess the more I thought about it, the more I equated it to ramping up. In baseball, like I didn't, nobody that I knew, like immediately after an off season, jumped right in and started trying to hit 85 off of a machine or off of somebody. You ramp up. I mean, you want to build up, doing walkthroughs. If you're doing installs in football, you're installing your system, you're installing responsibilities, you're doing it at walking speed to build it up. You're hitting off a tee first, and in this instance, you're ramping up against an opponent that, yeah, you're not going to schedule the Storm in the middle of the season because they're different level, because they're different kinds of teams. But you want to start off with something that's in a controlled environment. It lets some of these younger Storm players get a great opportunity to play against professional athletes and, in some cases, world-class athletes. For them to show what they can do, they are in their off season. They're able to go out and get 2 30-minute segmented runs. I mean, so it does benefit everybody in that respect. And Atlanta is able to go out there and stretch their legs out and get competition against not just it's not if for no other reason, you're getting competition against hungry players, people who are going to put in the effort and who are going to challenge you physically. And I thought that's what we saw yesterday, especially once they got their legs under them. I thought it was a good challenge for them to kind of warm up to and to kind of find their legs. Some of them, I think, for both teams, I think you saw the conditioning is still coming up to snuff. At the end of the segments, you could see guys still hands on the knees, hands on the hips, just getting their conditioning underway, which is where you have benchmarks you want to hit on that respect.
Yeah, I think the clip that Atlanta United posted from Gonzalo Pineda's interview after the game really set the scene for what yesterday was all about. It was the first step in ramping up preseason. And look, the club's lucky to have a local opponent like the Storm, an opponent on Sunday like the Georgia Revolution, who can be competitive in this environment. You're not looking for a game that's one-sided right now. It doesn't do any good. The first 10 minutes were a struggle for the Georgia Storm. You're dealing with different levels of players. And look, the number one thing, we talked about it a lot yesterday afternoon, the number one thing you'll see when you talk about different levels of players, teams will put to the side because that gets into some different conversations. Players, if the top, the elite, the best of the best, clean touch, can play fast, not run fast, not be quick, can play fast because they're thinking ahead and they've got the technical ability to be able to control the ball quickly. This was something that Dome Tarrant talked about with his style of play, going from Manchester City as an assistant to Pep Guardiola to NYCFC. Different levels, right? Different levels of players we're talking about. So where he would be able to do things maybe one touch very fast at Manchester City in a training session, it might take two touches for some players at NYC. Okay. When you start talking about the difference between an Atlanta United and a Georgia Storm, that shows up. When you're talking about the difference between an academy player coming into the Atlanta United group and a first choice top player, there's a difference. When you're talking about the guys coming from the college game, there's a difference. And that was, I think, what showed the most yesterday, because it's so early in preseason for everybody. You saw those differences in level. Players who have the ability to play faster will show that, and it becomes very obvious that, okay, these are guys that might be able to move up a level. We talked about it with Wilfred Camden Chupa as a player from Georgia Storm, who it's like, okay, he's obviously got something that can play at a higher level here. Andrew Carlton, who we've all known and seen for years, he's got the technical ability. That's not the issue for him. So you see those players stand out. I thought where Georgia Storm was impressive and what really helped Atlanta United yesterday is that after the first 10 minutes, where that pace of play was a problem for Georgia Storm, they settled in okay, and they made it difficult. They made Atlanta work, and that's what you wanted. You can do intra-squad scrimmages all day, and you can do those things. You don't get as much out of it as you do against playing somebody else. You get a little bit of just the stuff that comes up in a game, Jarrett, like a little bit of animosity at times, a little bit of, you go in a little bit harder against an opponent as opposed to one of your teammates. That kind of stuff that you have to do to gear up. Atlanta United got a good test yesterday, and that's exactly what they needed out of that game.
It was, and it had that. It wasn't animosity in a bad way, so don't get it twisted in that respect. Like there weren't fights or anything, but guys, Ozzy Alonso was still somewhere sliding across the field, going in at a ball at somebody's feet. Guys were going hard. They were chirping a little bit, and they were getting into it in a competitive, healthy way. And that's what you wanted to see. You want to see them continue to grow and continue to progress and to bring that physicality and that emotion into it. Because if you're just walking through the paces of it, and if you're going into it as a, oh, this is just it's Georgia Storm. It's we're just going to walk through it. Like, no, you're not getting anything out of it at that point.
Yeah.
You don't want to be scheduling Savannah State for football just so you can go drop 70 points on somebody and get nothing out of it.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, Atlanta's getting a team that was pretty well organized defensively. I don't know who was in goal yesterday for the Storm, but I thought their goalkeeper did a really good job of commanding his box. The first goal Atlanta scores is actually off of a save. The second goal they score is off of a save that he makes at a tight angle. He parries it away, but it parries it to the middle of the box, and Tyler Wolf.
No, that was the first goal. That
was the first goal.
Yeah, the second goal
was Jackson.
Yeah, it was off of a really nice play from Tyler Wolf after defending a set piece, but it wasn't I think Gonzalo talked about this afterwards. Like, it wasn't build up because it's defending the set piece. The ball pops out wide, and Wolf plays a beautiful ball down the line to Luis Araujo, who is then able to draw defenders, slip a pass in. Jackson curved his run really, really well to stay on side. We were almost right in line with it. Really well done by Jackson Conway, and a good finish. Outside of that, like the Storm played well. Here's something that they posted yesterday that I didn't know at the time, and I think it's a credit to the players they're starting to bring through. We talked about this with Noah Cobb. Noah Cobb played the second 30 minutes. Noah Cobb's 16 years old. He's got a handful of games under his belt in USL Championship. If you walked up to that field and you're watching it, you would not be able to pick out the 16-year-old for Atlanta United in that second 30 minutes. He didn't stand out in a negative way in any way. Actually one of the better players on the field in that second 30 minutes. He was outstanding. Well, Georgia Storm had a sophomore in high school play in the second part of the 30 minutes. When they made their subs in the 30 minutes, player comes over from Carrollton High School. He plays in that. I couldn't have picked him out. He didn't stand out as like, oh yeah, he can't play at this level. That's amazing. That's really, really cool to see those young guys at, again, different levels. But those young guys be able to get on the field there. And look, it's a short period of time. For Noah Cobb, it was 30. For the Georgia Storm player, it's 15 or so. But to be able to do that, that's a building block. The next step for Noah Cobb is to be able to play that well for 45, maybe 60, maybe play that well in USL Championship matches on a regular basis. Then we're talking about a future homegrown. Same thing for the Storm. When you get a young player who can get that taste and do well, and then come back for more and give you more next time. It's a really cool situation, and that's what is needed. This is why, like, I've been very bullish and talking about what the Storm are doing out in Carrollton, what the Revs are doing down in McDonough, what other grassroots teams are doing. Lemanio is one who has played in UPSL and NPSL up in Gainesville. Talked about the Dalton Red Wolves with a lot of local players up in West Georgia. Atlanta United can't bring all of those players in at all times. And when you're getting further afield, they can't always come in and train every day like some of the more local guys can. That doesn't mean they can't be professional players. And you need clubs like the Storm and the Revs and all these other parts of the state to be covered, because there's nothing in the water that prevents a kid in Carrollton from being able to play on the same field as professionals from Atlanta United. They need the training. They need the environment. They need a club like what the Storm are doing to be able to get to that point. And then down the road, when they get to that point, hey, then they can come into the Atlanta United Academy. Hey, maybe then they come in and sign a twos deal, that kind of stuff. It's very big. If they don't get to that level, maybe they go get their college paid for and get an education because of their game. If they don't get that level, maybe they go on and be a coach and they impact the next generation. It's critical for these grassroots clubs. And, I will continue to bang that drum for that side of the game at all times, because this country is so big, this state is so big that you can't have it filled by just one team. You need the grassroots too, and they all need to understand the different levels here. Just because like you like your local grassroots team, cool. That doesn't mean you have to be anti the big team in town. Just because you like the big team in town doesn't mean you can't go out on a Saturday night when they're out of town or they play on Sunday and go support the grassroots level and see it up close. It's all great for the game, and it's all needed for the game to grow.
It is, and hopefully we see more of it, and we'll see more of it in the immediate future this Sunday when Atlanta United's back in Athens and playing against the Georgia Revolution. It'd be a good opportunity for Revolution players to get out there and get involved and play as Atlanta ramps up their speed and ramps up their intensity, and the Revolution will bring that too. Because I mean, if I was playing on one of these teams and they said, "Hey, we're going to go scrimmage with Atlanta United, probably 2 30-minute segments, bring everything you've got," yeah, I'm trying to show out here. Like, if I'm any of these kids, I'm trying to show out to show, hey, you might have missed something in your scouting around the area because, as you said, you can't bring in everybody. So I'm trying to demand attention, even if it's not necessarily from Atlanta United. I'm trying to demand attention from someone else who might have seen it, who might be able to say to, word of mouth of, hey, I saw so and so play and they did some evil stuff. We should take a look.
I like guys who do evil stuff. I've seen the rosters. We're getting ready for the broadcast on Sunday, and I believe it's actually Sunday going to be 2:45s. So I think we're moving up a little bit. Again, it's that ramping up of the amount of time. But you've got a couple former Atlanta United Academy players who've gone on to play in college, playing for Georgia Revolution. They played for them in the NPSL too, so you're bringing them in. You've got a couple guys who have had like a little bit of a cup of coffee at the pro level. It's going to be competitive, and the Revs play. Some of these guys play with their Georgia Revolution reserves team that plays in the ADASL. Some of the Storm guys have played in UPSL, around the NPSL season. You've got opportunities for these guys to continue to get time. I want to grab some of their questions and stuff, and I want to remind everybody too. So we got about 10 minutes before Dylan Butler joins us. Sunday after the game in Athens, we'll be at Authentic Brewing. We've done a live show from there before. I know the Terminus Legion Athens chapter is going to come out. That's one of their hubs of activity. And we're going to be over there at 3 o'clock. We're going to run till 5. The U.S.-Canada game will be on. Darren Eels is going to come by and be on the show with us. You're going to get a chance to ask some questions there. We're working on some other special guests too. 3 to 5 in Athens at Authentic Brewing. You can head there right after the game at the UGA complex, and it will be available on Twitch, and a podcast will go out afterwards as well. But we hope to see it. Get there early. It's a good-sized place, but it's not a stadium. So if everybody from the game comes over, there's going to be people out in the parking lot. So head over there after the game. I'm looking forward to seeing y'all. I'm looking forward to chatting with Darren after that. But I want to get into a couple things from the Twitch pitch before we jump into MLS stuff. A lot of people pumped up about the opportunity yesterday, the game yesterday with a local team and how it benefits the whole state. Byrne brings up Dalton's going to stay a hotbed. Absolutely. The youth teams and Chattanooga FC as well is involved in the Dalton area with North Georgia Soccer Academy. They've signed players from Dalton's professional contracts. The Red Wolves are doing the same, multiple teams, multiple opportunities. It's a good thing for everybody involved. Dalton's absolutely going to stay a hotbed and only get better. Gainesville, I think, is the next one like that. I really do. I'm excited to see that. Jason Nix had a question. I want to get your take on it first, Jarrett, before I chime in. We talked about Andrew Carlton and the match yesterday and what we thought of his game. Talked about his pace. It's something that I've mentioned before and I thought has showed up in the games I've seen him play here lately. Jason said, what other on-the-field factors have held him back?
Yeah, I think most of it is just that pace and athleticism. This is something we talked about yesterday in our quick episode while we were, sitting at the bakery eating our food and laughing at John because he couldn't eat food with us.
That was funny. He will be back tomorrow as well, by the way. No worrying about John. He'll be okay.
By the way, we talked afterward as we were leaving. He said, yeah, he probably would have just had the pizza, or they had like a giant thing of pita covered in meat and spices. That's probably what he would have had if you.
That would have been that part would have been adventurous for him. He would have had like cheese pizza at the Jerusalem Bakery and Grill. That's what John would have had. We know that. It's okay.
I think this is just going to start an entire war on the Discord.
He wasn't having any beef.
Highly of the place.
Yeah, it was amazing. Thank you, Alex Basine, for the recommendation. I heard that from multiple people, but Alex put that bug in my ear heading up to the game yesterday. I was like, yep, that's lunch.
So we talked about this during a little bit of the show. We talked about this as we're watching it, and then they kind of treated him like an 8, like that deep lying playmaker. And I mean, it works because he's not the athlete that you want and necessarily need at a higher level playing as a 10, but playing at a higher level as like a deep lying playmaker. Yeah, just spray passes because he had a couple of balls that were really impressive. He had one off the top of my head. It was in the second 45 where he was on the left side of the field and he put the ball on his right foot and hit a curling, almost diagonal ball that landed at the knees of the wide player on the right side. It was a good ball.
I know the one so he can talk about.
Yeah, he still has those in his back pocket. And maybe playing him as a 10 isn't the thing. And I don't know what his future holds for him. But man, the athleticism, yeah, it's not quite there. But the technical ability is. Maybe you play him deeper and play him in that, deep lying playmaker look because he can still spray the ball like God knows what.
Yeah, I mean, it's on multiple levels, and the question was on the field, and that's where we're going to keep this right now, because that's what we see. I don't know enough about the rest of it. I can't answer the rest of it, but I can tell you on the field what my concerns were before, what my concerns are now. I think position has always been a hard thing for him, where to put him, because he is honestly kind of a throwback to an old school playmaker that doesn't really exist as much in the modern game. We've talked about this with Ezequiel Barco as well, where, at Independiente, they put Barco out on the left wing instead of playing him as a central number 10. We saw that a lot here as well. In 1990, he would have been a number 10. He would have played in the old school Argentine, like 4-3-1-2, where you got 3 guys running for him, doing all the defensive work. He stays central. He's the key. The kind of Carlos Valderrama role, if you think about how he played at the 10, that's where Andrew would have fit, because he's not fast, but you give him opportunity to pick out a pass, he'll pick out a pass and create an opportunity. That role doesn't really exist anymore. And to play him there, you've got to have other players doing the other work for him to make the most out of it. It's just hard to make that work. That player now, to have a player that you have to make other players fit for that one guy, he's got to be the elite of the elite. And there's just not many of those anymore. If Lionel Messi said, I want to play a 10, and that's where I want to play, and that's where you're going to play me if I'm playing on your team, you're going to do whatever he wants you to do. If Ronaldinho had said that in the past, you're going to do whatever you want to get the best out of Ronaldinho. You're not doing that for a player at Andrew Carlton's level. So then where do you play him? We've seen him out wide, which is a typical place to put a playmaker like that now, but there's pros and cons with that. I was actually really intrigued seeing him yesterday playing in a deeper role. Now, to do that at a higher level, he's got to work on his defensive side of the game. He's got to work on, cutting off passing lanes, defending, covering the gaps behind him, the awareness defensively. That's because that's something he hasn't really been asked to do. If he puts in the work to do that, yeah, he can be a pro player at that level. Absolutely. I mean, he could be a pro player, I think, at any level because of his technique, but it's not going to be as a 10. It's not going to be on the wing. And yes, all the other stuff has to get, worked out too for him to be at his best. But as a technical player, incredibly technical player, incredibly technical, one of the most technical young players I've seen in a long time. But there's not an obvious position for him. I think it might be playing deeper in a midfield. He's just got to be better defensively to be able to handle it. You're not going to be asking him to be a shutdown number 6, but can he do enough defensively to make that work while being able to spray those long passes and be a deep lying playmaker? It's a really interesting potential transition for him. It's really, really interesting. You'll like this one, Jarrett. Michael Ruiz says, one day there's going to be a kid from Tallapoosa that United misses out that's going to play for the Storm and will catch the eye of United in a preseason friendly and will ultimately be a starter for Atlanta United. Watch out for this in like 2027.
Yeah, I'm fine with that because we watched Shupa yesterday play really well in those limited minutes and doing what you and we talked about this with the Atlanta United players, like the kids who are coming into the draft or coming up through the academy or with the second team. They had 30 minutes to show what they can do on that particular stage. And yeah, the kids at the Storm doing the same thing. Like, they're trying to make sure that they're staying in shape, trying to make sure they're doing well for the next season coming up. But yeah, this is also an opportunity to show the biggest club in your footprint that you deserve their attention as well. Absolutely. Go show out. Do evil things.
You're back to evil things again. You want warlocks.
Do evil things.
That's going to be a shirt, probably. Anything else from yesterday that we didn't talk about? I thought we might touch on this for the first 30 minutes, but we've definitely filled it up. Anything else from yesterday that you wanted to touch on?
Not really. Like there's a lot of guys out yesterday for a number of reasons. Marcelino Moreno picked up a knock in training. He's fine.
Yeah.
He just got stepped on.
Yeah, day to day. Nothing they're worried about.
Yeah, don't freak out. Jake Mulroney still get his green card situation done. You've got guys under national duty. Yeah. So you are missing guys.
What do you think of McFadden some of these guys, right back? Sorry, what do you think about McFadden at right back with the first group?
I thought he was interesting in the sense that I think we talked about this, that on the other side you had Andrew Gutman, who's coming in from playing a year at Red Bulls, which is playing that press without the ball style. And I think we saw it in the second 45 with Bryce Washington, and Ibarra trying to spray passes. And Washington's still getting comfortable at right back, and he's not making the run until the ball's hit. Now, he's fast enough that he's almost catching up to it, but he's got to start timing those runs. If you want an attacking right back who has zero qualms about getting forward at the drop of a hat, Aiden McFadden did that. Now, now he's going to have to make sure he does the defensive side of things. I think he can. Don't get me wrong, but Aiden McFadden just jumped right in. Even when it wasn't perfect, I love the fact that he wasn't afraid of any of the moments and was attacking straight away and wasn't being shy about it. Just because you were brought up and playing with the first team guys, you can't be timid about this. And he wasn't. And I thought he was aggressive. He's still irrationally good in the air. I think it's going to be a big year for him with the twos.
Last one on yesterday from Emilio before Dylan joins us. We talked about the characteristics with Carlton. Are there similar concerns with Jackson Conway as far as his characteristics? Different positions, so I think you're looking for different things. I'm not as worried about that, but Conway, his game yesterday, and kind of what you think for him this season, Jarrett, quickly.
Conway, for me, I think he talked about it after the game. He wants minutes. He and Tyler Wolf both want minutes, and I think it's the right thing to say, because you're gonna get some minutes with the first team backing up, so that's how it shakes out, and you're gonna get opportunities with the second team. And look, Jackson didn't always take advantage of those opportunities at the end of the season with the second team. You
Yep.
wanted to see him come down there and dominate, and he didn't. So he's got to do that this year, and he's trying to round out himself into a more well-rounded player. So we're going to see if that takes.
I liked his confidence yesterday. I liked his goal as well. He wants playing time. He's got to earn it. Jarrett, thanks for the time. We'll see you tomorrow.
Sounds good.
All right, let's bring on our first guest. We got fancy graphics now, Dylan.
It is impressive.
Hey, we're moving up in the world. How are you, my friend?
Good, man. How are you?
Good. It was good to see some live preseason soccer yesterday.
Yeah.
Always a good thing. Question for you from the Twitch pitch straight out of the gate.
Yeah, let's go.
Where would you grade Atlanta United's pre-season or kind of maybe off-season work? Let's say the off-season acquisitions where the roster is right now. Where would you grade it?
I mean, it's not done yet, right? I mean, there's obviously still significant moves to be done. I mean, obviously the writing is on the wall there with Barco and then the moves that will subsequently happen from that. But so it's an incomplete grade at this point. But I think I don't know, B, I guess. I mean, I think it's going to be, I think it'll be a B plus probably once the last couple moves fall into place, right? So I still think it's incomplete right now.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think one really underrated thing, it's not really a move that they did this offseason, but you get a player back, is Andrew Gutman, who I had a chance to see up close for the first time yesterday in an Atlanta shirt. He's going to be just fine in the way that Atlanta wants to play. And I know that was a concern because Red Bulls didn't really look to have possession going into the final third. You have the high press. He's going to high press here, but he's going to have to be tidy and good on the ball. He showed a really good ability going forward yesterday. I think he fits Atlanta's style of play and philosophy to a T.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense to have him come back from that loan. He was one of Red Bull's better players last year. So I think that's a big, hard to say an acquisition, right? Because he was in Atlanta on the books, but that's a big return for Atlanta for sure. So listen, I think I'm not just saying it because the audience that's listening, right, and watching, but I think Atlanta are primed to have a very good year this year. It's going to be. I was interested, and you saw it firsthand, and you'll continue to see it firsthand. But how Pineda's game model with a full preseason, how that whole thing shakes out, and certainly it sounds early on like there's some positives there.
Yeah, you could see. I mean, it's a weekend, so it was kind of the base level. It sounded like from Gonzalo's post-game comments, he was talking more about the organization with the group and how they defended, which is generally where somebody will start. The build out stuff is going to take a little more time. There are still some, additions to happen, and there's some players missing right now. I mean, you're missing your two guys with the U.S. national team and Lennon and Robinson. You're missing your two guys with Venezuela and Hernandez and Joseph Martinez. Caleb Wiley's with the U20s. Mitchell Scholes with South Sudan. So some guys away. You've got the whole Barco situation that will, hopefully get resolved in the near future. It sounds like out of Argentina, he could be doing a medical today at River, according to some reports. Then you have the potential addition of Thiago Almada. So there's still a lot of things
and big
out
things.
there.
Yeah.
Big things, huge things. I mean, Almada's one of the bigger potential additions in the league this year. We've watched this week, especially, so many things happen around MLS, and there's still a lot on deck. Like the Dallas situation is one of the more fascinating ones for me, with a potential huge trade within the league for Paul Arriola. And they've got so much GAM right now, they don't know what to do with, so they can make that move happen. And bringing in Alan Velasco, if you add those two to that attack with a Palmacall healthy, potentially playing the 10, and Jesus Ferreira now on a DP deal, well, then maybe we're having a really different conversation about the power structure out west.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, I would. I mean, you're right. They do have a ton of GAM, but I still think they're kind of overpaying for Areola.
Maybe a little.
Yeah.
It's tough because of the market now to really figure out what are the right numbers for GAM trades.
Yeah. No, fair. But something that's been needed, right? Like we talked about it when we were referencing just the Velasco deal and how there's such a need for them on the wings this year. There's no depth there at all, really. So, now you're bringing 2 starters right off the bat, right? And like you said, you can now move Pomical, who had to play on the wing kind of out of necessity. You could put him now more into a natural position, whether it's the 10 or the 8. And Ferreira, like we said, right, could potentially have a big year. So, yeah, I mean, Dallas making moves for sure, addressing needs, which is good to see. And one of those teams that seems to be not rebuilding, but certainly adding the parts they needed to in the offseason in a big way.
Some other teams that we've been kind of waiting to see what the offseason is going to look like for them, what the moves are going to look like. Charlotte, obviously, being a new team, looks like they could be announcing their first designated player today. Maybe not a place that we would have thought coming into this preparation that MLS would be shopping in Greece. A lot of Greeks coming into the league, or Greek-connected players coming into the league.
Is there a big Greek population in Charlotte? I think there is everywhere.
I mean, yeah, there's probably a few, but not that I'm aware of. I wouldn't have thought that would have been a spot. Now, for Charlotte, and DC's looking at bringing in a Greek player. Charlotte's looking at bringing in a Polish player who's been playing in Greece, and Karol Swiderski, I think is correct. Charlotte, we've wondered what their big moves are gonna be.
Yeah.
Okay. If they've got Ortiz now, that's step 1. If you get your number 9, okay, that's step 2. But coming from the Greek league to MLS, I don't know what the expectation is.
For sure. And I think, I don't know a ton about the Greek league, but I'd imagine part of the thought process is probably, you can get some good value, right? It's not one of the bigger leagues in Europe where you're worrying about larger transfer fees or stuff like that. So I'd imagine they're probably thinking they can get a bargain deal done. But I like the addition of Ortiz a lot. Have kind of dove a little bit or dived a little bit deeper into that, and I think it's pretty smart for an expansion team to have guys who are already familiar with your manager and his system and the way that he wants to play.
Yeah.
And Ortiz fits that bill, right? Certainly. So in addition to knowing the tactical setup, you're already familiar with a couple of your teammates as well. So I think that's big for Charlotte as well. And I was on that conference call Monday with Ortiz, and he was great, just kind of talking about again playing under Ramirez. He said that he grew up a lot in the short period of time, but in the time that he had with him in Ecuador, and kind of became a better player against the ball than he was before. But we'll still see kind of what he will bring. He's a guy who could play in a few different roles for them as well, which I think is important as well, right? To have that versatility. He's obviously primarily a winger, but he said as well in the past he's played as a 10 just behind the 9. So he's a guy who's not afraid to shoot from distance, which you like to see as well, right? We like our golazos. So I think that's a big pickup for them, and I think I give them the benefit of the doubt a little bit because of kind of seeing how these other moves, like even McGree, right? Like he's a guy who obviously didn't come to MLS, but you see the value in him as well, and so I think their scouting department does deserve some credit here, and we'll see kind of how this one will pan out as well.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by the Polish number 9. I'm just those moves really seem to be very hit or miss in MLS. Like
Sure.
you'll get, a Shabilko who was very successful in Philadelphia at the beginning. Then I think maybe didn't fit the style as much as Curtin was pushing into more of a kind of a Red Bulls way of playing. I want to get into DC real quick because we've heard that DC has cap issues, and that was limiting what they could do. Now it's looking like Areola is going to be gone to Dallas. That could get announced today. It's looking like Kevin Paredes is going to go to Wolfsburg for a big return. And they're linked to Greek forward Taxiarchis Fountas coming in as a designated player in the summer. I know they got to open up some cap space, and they're going to have more allocation money now with Areola's trade and with Paredes coming in. But that feels like a lowering of their level in a year where they were not a playoff team to start with. Yeah, I'm curious to see what Losada does with that group.
Yeah, I agree. And he's another one too. I mean, it's a first year for Pineda, but now it's the second year for him. And we remember last year too about this time how much he was complaining about the lack of fitness among his players and just all the work that he had to do. Right. So now it's his second preseason and now obviously more comfortable with the group. But I agree with you. I think when you look at an 11, there's some regulars there who are no longer there now. And I don't know if they've done such a great job in replacing them. Right. So definitely a lot of work to be done for DC in an East again, that I think is just getting better and better. Right. Like I think the teams that, Atlanta is going to be better. I'm interested in Charlotte. Inter Miami's, we talked about them a ton, right? And how many moves they've made. And
I think they'll be better.
Got to think they'll be better for sure. I like some of the moves that Orlando's been making. Replacing an attacking group that got stale last year. So I think all of this kind of weighs, and then you have the Supporters Shield winner and the MLS Cup winner in your same division. So I think a lot of that's going to weigh on DC United, I think, going forward.
Let's talk about the champs in NYC. In the 10 MLS players primed for a year 2 bump article by our friend Sam Jones, Tylus Magno is there. And it brings up the question of the man for them last year, Tati Castellanos. Mm-hmm. Is he going to be in MLS in 22?
Good question. I think NYCFC is in a great position here because there's certainly still interest, but I don't know the exact magic number, but they have certainly a number in mind, and they're not willing to go under that, right? So I think this could be a record transfer deal for MLS and NYCFC, and they're in no hurry, I think, to push that button, right? So I will say I don't think he completes the year. We might see him in the beginning, but he's out, I think, in the summer. So yeah, Magno becomes a big part of that, and I think, again, it's one preseason game, scrimmage, whatever you want to call it, but to have Eber score a brace in the first half against Red Bull, that's huge, right? If you can get him anywhere close to the form he was a couple of years ago before the ACL, massive addition for NYCFC team that, obviously now you're without Jesus Medina, Maxi Morales. He was great, obviously late, a year older, potentially losing a Tati at some point, certainly. So I think Eber is a bit of that wild card for them this year. And I think if he pans out, it could be another huge year for them.
He doesn't fit the year 2 bump conversation, but the player at NYC that I'm looking at maybe the most here with a magnifying glass is Keaton Parks. Yeah. I think if Keaton becomes the replacement for James Sands, and they can replace Sands and how important he was, and still be what Ronnie Dyla wants them to be in the middle of the park. And Parks is going to have a partner, if it's Acevedo, if it's Morales, Alfredo Morales, whatever that group is. It feels like Parks is the one who now, instead of being the sidekick, really has to be the guy in that central midfield.
Yeah, and I think if you look at the season he had last year before that injury and then the blood clots and everything that he was great, right? He was certainly one of the better players for NYCFC, and he's really grown as a player from the time that he first came in from Benfica. So I think this is another opportunity for him to take that next step now as a player. And you're right, I think assume more of a the man role in that midfield that he sort of acquiesced a little bit last year to a Sands. But I like those parts as well, right? Like you said, it's a little bit of a rotation, I think, potentially with an Azevedo, Parks, and Alfredo Morales. That's a pretty good trio to have playing behind a Maxi Morales. Certainly guys who will allow Maxi to play freely and play in the attack and not worry about any sort of defensive work, right? And I think their central defense is pretty good as well. You'll get at some point Tinnerholm back. That's a huge addition as well. So yeah, I think they could start the season. It's funny, we fall into the trap of talking about the Champions League and breaking the the long streak of Mexican winners. NYCFC could be a team, especially I think if you've got Tati in the mix for that first half of the season to make a Champions League run. I think that they have the potential, I think, to make a deep run.
Yeah, the Tati Castellanos eventual departure is really interesting, especially now with River Plate popping up into this conversation and Julian Alvarez going to Manchester City at some point. River is loaded to try to win the Copa Libertadores, it feels like. And there's been talk that maybe Alvarez stays the whole year. If he doesn't, it would feel like, okay, Tati going to River in the summer might be the move.
Yeah. And he has a hot start maybe in Champions League and MLS. That tag can go even higher, right? So I think it's a win-win for NYCFC and for Tati as well.
Yeah, I think so too. I want to get into Philly and the trade of Shabilko, who Shabilko seemed to be a guy who lost favor with Philly fans as his time there went. I think he was less of a fit at the end of his time than he was at the beginning, because we've seen Jim Curtin kind of transition that team to one that could play with the ball more to a team that now plays off the ball a whole lot more. And it doesn't suit Shabilko. He goes to Chicago. We'll talk about them in a second. But Philly's linked with Danish forward Mikael Ure coming in. About $2.8 million in a transfer fee is what's being reported out of Denmark right now. A designated player level salary. It feels like Philly is going more into a style, a template, a philosophy, and they're getting players who fit that rather than just going out in the market and getting who is good.
Yeah, and I think it's, again, the evolution of a team, right? Where before it was, let's try to find these guys who are under the radar, and certainly that was true of Shabilko at the time, and then have them play our system, right? To now saying, let's actively search for guys who play our way of football, right? So I think that's the case here. And yeah, with Shabilko, look, you weren't getting a lot of pressing and counter pressing out of him, right? So I think I think it was a good time for them to do it. Chicago desperately needing that number 9. I think he fits better into the way they want to play. Already love the first tweet, right, with the Polish sausage and everything like that, right? So they're gonna that's an area that does have a big Polish population, so that's he can kind of embrace that and go into there. And I think again, it's one of those, we don't often see sort of trades or moves within MLS that don't actually help both teams, right? Like there's very few where you're like, they got fleeced. I think this is one where it should help Chicago. He also wanted an extension that obviously Philly was not willing to give. He'll sign a new deal. Likely it won't be a designated player deal. So they'll they'll get value for that as well. And yeah, if Philly can go out and chase a guy who's more into their system. So I think it's a win-win for both.
Yeah, we're seeing a few more of those, and I think we're seeing more teams that have these profiles. We've talked about that here in Atlanta with players who get linked to Atlanta United, and you'll see a name because the rumor mills will run wild, but you'll see a name and a kind of player that you're like, wait a minute, that doesn't fit the profile of what the club's done, and you can kind of dismiss it. Philly has a profile. Red Bulls have a profile. I think Atlanta has a profile. Seattle's starting to get a profile. Chicago with Ezra Hendrickson needs a profile.
Yep.
And, it's going to take him a minute to do that. But that feels like you're starting to see the difference between the top clubs and everybody else with the clubs that have that identity and that profile of players they look for.
Miami changing their profile now, right?
Yeah.
And they've been very clear about what that will be, right? Energetic.
Charlotte has a profile too. Straight out of the gate, they've got a profile.
100%. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's super important, both in terms of what your face for potential transfers are, right? Like if you're, we talk about it from this side of the Atlantic sort of a view, but what about the players coming in, right? They want to know what they're coming into, and I think it's important to have a very distinct way of playing, certainly like you said, a profile for them as well. So yeah, I think Charlotte doing it right out of the gate is huge too.
A couple of things before we wrap up. Red Bulls announced just a few minutes ago that Andres Reyes underwent surgery. Makes that acquisition of the other Nealis brother important, huh?
Huge. And Aaron Long, you see him, with thumbs up back at training. That's
good.
Massive as well, both for club and country, right? So you would envision a Long Nealis potentially backline, I guess, to start as well. Also makes the potential talk and move of Edwards returning even bigger there as well.
Yeah, because if you can play Morgan higher up and have Edwards as that right wing back, if they're going 3 center backs and Tolkien on the left side, then okay, that can work. That's not bad. That can definitely work. I want to get into the national team with you. Games tomorrow. We hear that Eric Zavaleta is out for El Salvador. That's going to hurt them. It's also going to hurt them that you're going into play in a place where I think school was canceled in Columbus today. It's always a good sign for an international match coming up the next day. What are you expecting tomorrow?
El Salvador, not so much in the Ocho because they've struggled, but they've been a team that's definitely impressed me under Hugo Perez, right? So I love for El Salvador. I love their attitude, right? Like they're going to go at you. I mean, for a team to try to outpossess El Tri, at the Azteca, like the cojones, right? I love it.
Yeah.
So they have again an identity. They know their personnel. They have a way that they're playing. They're going to be in that 4-4-2 diamond. They're going to try to outpossess you, and I think I think it's important though for the U.S. to establish themselves in this game, and maybe the first 30 minutes El Salvador thinks they can play and that they could knock the ball around, fine, but I think it's huge for the U.S., especially in the second half, to really probably wear El Salvador down, right, and take control of the match. Set pieces will be huge for the U.S. against them, but this, we often have talked about the magic number in these 3-game windows, right, and what is acceptable or what should they be going for. And obviously, look, you want to get 9. I think from these 3 though, I think 7 is a really good number.
Yeah, I agree.
But that starts with 3 against El Salvador for sure. So I think you're going to play your best 11 straight out of the gate. I know that Canada is the big sexy game coming on the weekend, but points at home are critical, right?
Yeah,
so everybody, McKennie, Pulisic, Dest, everybody that is part of that, best 11 you would consider, I think will be on the field.
had a question about the weather in Columbus. Luckily, they're not playing the game today. It's I think 5 degrees right now in Columbus, Ohio. The high is 20 today. Tomorrow, the low is 20, and it gets up to a balmy 32. But it'll warm up throughout.
32, that's great. You don't need the undersleeve, you just wear the straight short sleeves. We're good.
Yeah, Dylan. I'm a Georgia boy, and no, 32 is not great. It's not great at all. It's a lot better than we thought it might be, though, and it looks like it'll warm up as the day, and it'll be around 30 during the match tomorrow. We wondered how much weather would affect it, and I haven't been a big fan of playing these games in cold weather environments. I think it becomes a little bit more of an equalizer here. It will affect El Salvador in a bigger way than it'll affect the U.S., but this is a game. I'm with you. The U.S. has to go win this, and they have to win it convincingly, I think. This is a game that they should win and not really have to sweat too much.
Like a 3-0 kind of a thing, a 4-1 even,
Yeah, I'll take a 2-0 in complete control. I'm not – I guess it's more like convincingly in the way they play as opposed to the scoreline for me. I think it's important.
Yeah, and just a quick note just about that cold weather. I agree with you to an extent, but to me, I think, look, the United States as a country, right? What we love is it's a place for all, right? And so there's always going to be visiting fans, right? Or opposition fans, because they live in our country as well, right? And that's a great thing to have, obviously. And it's a situation you don't see in these other countries, right? Like in Mexico, in any of these other CONCACAF teams still alive, you don't have that. It's a very unique situation we have, right? So I think the idea, for me at least, is more get as big advantage as you can in a location where maybe there's not as many of that fan base, right?
Yeah.
They're still going to be there. But if you play the game in Atlanta, if you play the game in Orlando, if you play it in Austin, I still think you're going to have issues with the opposing fan base. And I think certainly lessons were learned from that debacle against Costa Rica at Red Bull.
True.
So for me, it's more about, Columbus is a place that's been a very good home stadium, right? In the past, Minnesota, I get it again too. You want to gain your advantages. Not so much. I agree with you. I don't think you're gaining an advantage weather-wise, but from a fan base wise, I think that's a big advantage, these two matches.
That's true. That's something that we've zeroed in a lot more on the weather. And look, 32, if it's around 30 during the game, that's not going to be as debilitating. That's not as big of a deal. If we're talking about playing in 5-degree weather, then it's just going to be hard to play. It's a big difference.
It's not a hard turf in Edmonton.
Now they might get some of that in Hamilton on turf on Sunday. That one's the real wild card here, because no Alphonso Davies for Canada, maybe no Eustachio. He reportedly has tested positive for COVID, but he is in the squad. They're expecting him to be able to play at some point in this window. That is the game that I think a lot of people are looking at as the referendum game. I'm fine with a point. I'm fine with a point no matter what it looks like. You get a point out of that, you get 7, you're all but done in qualifying.
Yeah, and I think that's so critical for any of these teams. This window is massive, right? Because you don't want it to get to those. Look, right? You don't want it to get down to that last group of games. So, if no one's clinching at this point, but you're getting to a point where you're feeling a lot better about yourselves come March than having to worry about those games, right? So I think for any of these teams that are in it, Canada, Mexico, certainly the U.S., super really pivotal matches here, just to set yourself up now for that final stage of qualification. Yeah,
these are huge. You don't want it to come down to the last 3-game window with a trip to the Azteca and a trip to I don't know if Costa Rica said where they're playing it yet, but maybe the dungeon in Saprissa.
Right.
Don't want any part of that. They'll probably do it at the National Stadium, which they've lost a little bit of their advantage because it's not quite as imposing.
Yeah.
But, you know, if you're Costa Rica, even if they're eliminated, which they might be going into the last day, they probably will be unless they have a big window here. They'll do everything possible to knock the U.S. out.
I love it's when you have a stadium with the nickname of Monsters Cave. That's pretty good.
That's not a place you want to go play and hang out. That's going to be a difficult spot.
No, you put monster and cave in the same. Want nothing to do with caves or monsters.
No, I don't anyway. What else you got coming up over at MLSsoccer.com this weekend with moves all over the league, with preseason games, with national team duty? I'm sure you're having a chance to relax.
Yeah, yeah, and a storm coming up the coast here too. So
no worries.
Yeah, no, it's no. Listen, it's what we love to do. So it's I'll be on the match for the U.S. Canada game on Sunday. So man, definitely looking forward to all this. It's gonna be a lot of fun. Certainly awesome. A lot to talk about, right?
Oh yeah, we'll have plenty to talk about next week. Tuesday, back to the normal spot.
I believe so. Yes.
Okay, we'll figure it out. If not, we'll see you on Wednesday next week. Dylan, thanks for the time, man. Appreciate it.
Hi, buddy.
All right, let's get guest number 2 of the day up, and here he comes. Mike Conti joining the show. What's up?
What was that?
I got skills, yo.
Look at this.
I got skills.
Like, this is a more elaborate broadcast than the Super Bowl. Hey. I'm impressed.
I've been working on some things.
Well, I can tell. You have to show me how to do this, man. I don't even know how to follow that now. Man, that's great. I almost feel like I should turn my camera on. I'm so impressed.
Well, but you will for stoppage time.
Yeah, later. For stoppage time.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And we'll get deep into Atlanta United stuff for that at 2:00.
Yeah, I've never in my life had an intro.
So you got an intro now?
Yeah, I've never in my life. Like, I've been in broadcasting since how many years ago was 1997? Was that? I guess that was 25 years ago.
Yeah.
So I've been in broadcasting 25 years. I've never had an intro. I'm impressed.
Now people are wanting theme songs for regular guests. We can add that in after the graphic. Maybe go to a theme song as we bring you in. Give me time. We're working on it. We're getting there. Moving up in the production ranks. I want to get into a couple of things. First off, you're going to be with us on Sunday after the game in the Soccer Down Here crossover episode from Authentic Brewing with Darren Eels hanging out with us. The U.S.-Canada game is going to be going on. We'll have a few things to talk about after Atlanta United and the Revs play. It should be a great crowd over at Authentic.
But by the way, on the Twitch pitch, and Jason, you can help me with this too, because obviously you've spent a lot of time in Athens. I'm actually, Leanne and the dog and I are going to spend the whole weekend out there just because.
Oh, very nice.
They initially suggested that we do our show on Saturday, so I was kind of mentally preparing to be out there all weekend. And, well, now we don't have to be, but Leanne and the dog were excited about spending the weekend in Athens. So if anyone on the Twitch pitch has recommendations of, like, pet-friendly things to do in Athens, like on a Saturday night, or I'll be busy on Sunday. I guess Authentic is pet friendly. But if anyone has any suggestions on a pet friendly thing to do in Athens, I would definitely love to hear it on the Twitch pitch, because right now, you've met Clark. He's kind of a ladies' man. I mean, I'm thinking about just walking and by some sorority houses and seeing if anyone's going to notice and come out and love on him. But if there's something a little less creepy and a little more organized that I could be doing, let me know. I'm open to all suggestions.
Yeah. Man, everything changes so much in Athens. Like, my era of time in Athens, those places are all long gone.
Yeah.
And I wasn't, when I was a student at UGA, I wasn't looking for pet-friendly places at the time either.
No.
I was looking for places with lots of alcohol.
Yeah, same here. Sometimes they go hand in hand.
Sometimes they do.
I'm just excited because Athens has some of the college town eateries that I used to really enjoy at Penn State. Like they have DPDO in Athens. I love that place. The Calzone place. Love it.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I think they still have Gumby's Pizza in Athens. I mean, that was those pokey sticks were they don't anymore. Oh,
Gumby's closed. It was very sad when I found out that Gumby's
Leanne will
closed.
be devastated. But as long as DPDO is still open, I think we're going to be in business.
Bart's very excited about your DPDO.
I'm telling you, the Waken and Bacon calzone is one of my favorite things ever. The egg and bacon and ricotta calzone. I'll eat that, 3 times a day. So, but I don't know if DPDO is not really dine-in anyway. Yeah. But anyhow, Athens suggestions, I'm taking them. And you're right, Darren will be with us at Authentic. Tentatively, in fact, there are lots of text messages going on about this right now, Jason.
Yes, I have noticed.
You've been looking at your phone.
Yes.
We think around 3:15. So I don't know what the format of the match is going to be on Sunday. I don't know if it's going to be like a full 90 or if they're going to play shorter periods or what. But I know the plan is
playing 245s.
Okay, good. I hope so. I mean, we're going to broadcast it, so I get paid by the minute. So I would hope that they'd play 245. So, so what we're going to do is, we'll do the stream from Turner from noon to 2, and then we'll just head up to Authentic, and we hope you all will join us. And Darren's going to be there, and we might have some additional guests as well. But you're right. It's going to be a really great opportunity to just kind of hang out. I think the whole point of what we're all doing on Sunday is to not only celebrate Georgia's National Collegiate Football Championship, but I think, which is very important, but we know there's a lot of Atlanta United fans who are attending the University of Georgia. We know there's a ton of Atlanta United fans who live in Clark County, who live in Barrow County, and this is an idea on the part of the club to really be accessible to all of the Atlanta United fans who are out there down 316. So I really, really hope we get a great turnout at Authentic on Sunday, because it's going to be really great to meet a lot of you in person who we don't typically get to meet when we do things inside the perimeter.
Yeah, it works out perfect too that, we're there for the game, but then that US-Canada game it's a 3:00 start. Like, it's going to be going on while we're there. So you come out to the Authentic, grab some good beer, listen to what Darren thought about the game. You're going to be able to ask a couple questions too. We're going to try to work that in. I'm not sure how long we're going to get Darren before he starts to head back to the ATL, but we're going to try to get a few questions from you guys for Darren as well. We're going to have questions about the game, the preseason, everything going on. So just a great overall soccer day out in Athens on Sunday. You didn't have a chance to see yesterday. I know you got pulled into a meeting and see the match yesterday. We've talked about it a little bit this morning, and people have asked some questions I've tried to follow up on. You saw, I think, the building blocks yesterday of what Atlanta's shooting for in 2022. And Gonzalo Pineda, talked about that afterwards. Like, this was the first step in the progression. I think he talked about progression a lot in the way the team plays, in the team's fitness, all of these sorts of things. When we get to Athens on Sunday, you got one game under your belt, learned some things, maybe saw some things that you didn't like so much that you're going to work on over these next couple of days. Athens is the second test of the preseason, and it's a game where guys will have a little bit of pressure on them in front of a crowd to perform to get where they want to be on that depth chart.
Yeah, and I like what Gonzalo said yesterday in one of the little clips that the team put out about, yesterday was kind of the first step towards playing in a competitive way, playing the way that he wants to see these guys play. And look, it's a friendly against a lower division team. It sounds like, by the way, from what I've been told, Georgia Storm gave Atlanta United a great scrimmage.
They played well. They gave a good test. First 10 minutes were tough for them. The pace of play was really tough. After that, they adjusted pretty well. They made Atlanta work, which is what you wanted.
Well, and yes, exactly. So above anything else, I don't want that to get lost. Like, fair play to Georgia Storm. Great job. And I know last year when South Georgia Tormenta came up to the training ground to give Atlanta United a scrimmage, that was a really, really tough scrimmage. And South Georgia Tormenta really got Atlanta United prepared for the final phase of their training camp and the early kind of moments of the CONCACAF Champions League. So I don't want that to get lost in anything. Real fair play to Georgia Storm. And I hope that's something that Atlanta United will continue to work out with Georgia Storm, because Georgia Storm benefits from it too. But yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, you're trying to build cohesion and chemistry right now. And I thought it was really important that Andrew Gutman got a chance to play as much as he did yesterday. And play with a lot of the first choice group. It wasn't exclusively a first choice 11, but a lot of that first 11 yesterday is probably going to be the first 11 on February 27th. So I'm glad that Andrew Gutman got a chance to play with that group. I'm really glad Jackson Conway got a chance to play with that group. And I really liked what I heard from Jackson after the match yesterday, talking about how, he's trying to prove to Gonzalo Pineda right now that they don't need to sign another striker. Love that. Go out and compete and earn it. And that's great. And the fact that there was a little bit of interplay between Araujo and Conway yesterday, I thought was really, really good. Eric Centeno, really loved the fact that he had an opportunity to go out and compete and really hold his own, from what it sounds like, with the first choice group yesterday. That's really, really vital. So these are all good things when you're trying to build some chemistry and continuity. And you're right. This is the first building block. I mean, this is not going to be the final polished product. I hope it wouldn't be after 6 days of training camp.
Yeah.
But it's a start. Now you want to take the next step Saturday or Sunday in Athens. Then you want to go down to Mexico and take a couple more steps. I don't think you're going to see Chivas' first choice group, but you want to take another step against them. And it's all kind of leading up to February 20th in Birmingham, where you want to be pretty much at the point where you are polished.
Yeah. And
then maybe you do have the flexibility on the 20th, where if you have to make a decision on someone, maybe you get a longer look from that guy, and you maybe think about resting or playing short minutes for everyone else with an eye towards February 27th. But you're right. Yesterday was the first building block. It sounds like they passed the test. Sounds like no one got hurt, which is really, really important, vitally important right now that no one got hurt. Maybe the biggest priority of all. So I think it was a really good day. It's a good day for Georgia Storm, but I think it was a really good day for Atlanta United and for guys like Gutman and Centeno and Conway in particular.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on a couple things there. Centeno especially, because Gonzalo Pineda was asked about him. I was really impressed with Centeno from just a personality on the field. And, when I say that, it's not about things he was saying or like, facial expressions or any of that. It's the way he was approaching the match, the way he was trying to play. He didn't play scared in any way. He didn't play timid. He, first time with an MLS team on the pitch in a match situation, he was running at players. In the little highlight video that was posted, you saw him like dribbling at players, going 1v1. He did that consistently. I thought Gonzalo made it clear too. Another element that I think shows more character out of Centeno is typically he played on the right side in college. He played on the left here because Araujo's on the right side. So he's in an unfamiliar spot on the field, and it didn't negatively affect his game. He didn't play simple. He didn't play scared. He went for it. I love that about him as a player. He's still young. There's a lot of room for him to grow. He's probably going to play for the twos for the majority of his time here this season, but he's on a Generation Adidas deal. He's not going anywhere, and he had a good first day showing a lot of upside.
Which is great, and I'm glad that he got the chance to compete. And this is going to be, I think, a really, really important next couple weeks for Eric Centeno, because his spot in the team is secure because of the fact that he's on Generation Adidas.
Yeah.
So he'll be showing up to work in Marietta every day. I mean, I think we know that. But here's a real opportunity for him to, again, not only compete for first team minutes, but make himself a better player for the second team. And a lot of what happens in this training camp is the first team and the second team working together as much as they possibly can. So no matter what happens from here for Eric Centeno, This is very, very important player development, and it's going to make him a better player for whatever team he ends up starting the season for. But I really do like the fact that, I mean, again, and I'm living vicariously through your accounts and Joe Patrick's accounts and Doug's accounts and, the people I follow. Your accounts of yesterday's friendly, because again, I wasn't able to be there, which that's another story. But anyhow, I like the fact that he went out there and he showed some versatility and he showed confidence, which is really, really, and he should be confident. He's got a good pedigree. He's got a really, really good pedigree. So he should be confident.
Yeah, definitely. Another question from Jason Nix about Santiago Sosa. Sosa and Hyndman are both progressing as they should be. They're not ready to play minutes yet. They could be by the end of preseason, but there's not a timeline on their return just yet. But nothing out of the ordinary here. Like there's nothing to worry about with their progression in terms of coming back from surgery. Sosa had sports hernia surgery. Hyndman had the ACL injury last year. Both are active, but not active enough to participate in games just yet. That's about where we thought they'd be right now.
Yeah. And again, I mean, I'm not going to be concerned about Sosa or Hyndman. I mean, Hyndman, I think, is still on a very optimistic timetable.
Yeah.
Sosa, from what we were told a week or two ago by Carlos, it sounds like Sosa should be really, really close by this time. That they were worried maybe the first week or two of training camp would be impacted. But it sounded like just on Carlos's timetable that by the time these guys go down to Mexico, Sosa's probably going to be ready to go or close enough where he can do some things down there. So not overly worried about it. And here again is a really good opportunity for Osvaldo Alonso to kind of build some chemistry right now. And that's a name that I kind of omitted at first, but that's very, very crucial. And it sounds like Alonso really fit in well yesterday. And as we know, because he's been in the league forever, he's very solid. He knows where he needs to be and he knows what he needs to do. So I'll look forward to Sosa's return, but in the meantime, I'm really comfortable with the cover that Atlanta United has right now at that position.
Yeah, bringing in Alonso with the recovery for Sosa is so big. And that position group, to me, is what's so interesting right now, because you have Sosa and Alonso, who are more pure sixes. You have Sejdic, who can play as a six. We saw Josetu play as a six last year. Those two guys are probably more of eights, more box to boxes. Ibarra is more of a defensive midfielder, maybe not a pure six, but can pair up with somebody sitting deeper. There's a lot of options in that part of the field that Gonzalo Pineda will be able to pick and choose from to match the opponent, to match the style of play that Atlanta is going to play in a match, to match current form. Because I think across the group, at all the positions, but especially central midfield, you got deep competition on that training pitch every day, and guys are going to have to earn their time.
Yep. Yeah. And that's the club profile of Atlanta United. That's what they've tried to do from day one. And they've done a remarkable job of it, of making sure that there is depth at every position. So there's competition at every position. I know, Burned and a couple other people in the Twitch pitch right now are talking about depth on the wing, and maybe that being a concern with Dom and Mulroney and Scholl. But you're talking about three players are going to provide cover for Araujo. So I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah, and don't forget with the winger too, you've got the possibility that we've seen with Lennon playing on the wing, with Hernandez playing up higher on the wing, not just as an outside back or wing back. Same on the other side. Saw Bello do that at different points in more of his twos in his youth career. Wiley has played on the wing. I think Gutman is more of a pure left back, but what he showed yesterday going forward, if you have to play him at left wing, I'm not freaking out about it. Exactly. You've got that possibility too.
Yeah. 100%. So again, I like where things stand at this moment. Just please, God, stay healthy.
It's always a crapshoot. Somebody
right.
will get something. I mean, Moreno got stepped on in training. That's why he didn't play yesterday,
Right.
but it's not anything serious. As long as it's stuff like that, like they got to go hard. They got to work here in preseason. You can't put them in bubble wrap because that's not going to get them ready for the season. But you don't want anything serious. You don't want any long-term setbacks.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, like a Franco Escobar injury that was suffered in the 2019 training camp. Miles got that knock against Leones Negros that I think cost, if I remember correctly, I think that cost him everything up until the pandemic.
It did.
Bello had that really scary fall in Birmingham in 20 that cost him a couple weeks.
Yeah.
Those are the things you don't want. Yeah, something like Moreno getting stepped on, soccer accident. It happens. He'll be back. But again, so far so good. And I'm not worried about this coach overtraining anyone either.
No. And that became a big thread through questions yesterday. It was referring back to Gabriel Heinze and his time, and became maybe a little bit too much of a thread because.
I mean, look, it's narratives.
I know.
And I understand the storytelling that you're trying to do there because it is a major juxtaposition. I mean, the fact that there was a preseason friendly that was fully transparent and open to the media yesterday would flat out would not have happened last year under Heinze.
No, it definitely wouldn't have. I think the element, and I thought Gonzalo nailed it, is that there's not a right wrong here. It's every manager has to be themselves. Some guys, and we see it in every sport, they want to keep everything close to the vest. We'll leave the overtraining stuff out to the side for a minute because that's a little bit more subjective. But in terms of how they want to present themselves, how they want to present their team, I mean, you would know better than me. Like some football coaches who are just, nope, you get nothing. Nope, everything is locked down. I'm not giving you anything. And some are like, hey, come watch. I don't care. That's fine. We're transparent. We're open. You have to be your personality. And we didn't get to meet Gabriel Heinze. So, I mean, I can't tell you what he's like person to person, but we know Gonzalo, and he is absolutely all of his actions, all of his style on the touchline, everything we see in training sessions. He is absolutely authentic to himself.
Yes. Yeah. It reminds me a lot of Stephen Glass in that way. And I say that as an absolute compliment.
Yeah.
I think Pineda has such a good feel for the personalities that he's coaching right now.
Yep.
And has such a professional way of kind of navigating those personalities to make sure that he's maximizing everyone's talent without pushing too hard, but yet wanting to know each and every player on a personal level, which I think is something he even talked about a little bit yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say again, I mean, I remember that first press conference we heard after a match, and it was a match they lost to Nashville in August of last year. And I remember turning to you during the post-match show and saying, I think we're really going to like this guy.
Yep.
And he has not taken a step wrong yet in anything that he has said. I really, really am very optimistic. And I think you're seeing the response from the players. Yes, there were a lot of questions about that yesterday, but the takeaway that I got was that, this is a tough training camp. It's an intense training camp. We're doing a lot of work, but it doesn't feel like we're in the Army anymore. That's exactly where you want to be.
Yeah. Some groups of players, and this is consistent, I think, just in sport in general. Some groups of players will respond to that idea of being in the Army and being a robot, as Jackson Conway said. Some groups of players respond to that, and you can get great performances out of them. We've seen teams in all sports who are workmanlike, that kind of thing. But this group, personality-wise, is, I think, reacting much better to Gonzalo's personality, and that's the key here.
By the way, how did you think Wolf did yesterday? Because I'm seeing some Twitch pitch conversation on that. The one thing that I want to speak to, I don't know how to pronounce your name. I'm sorry, but a comment on how Pineda rates Wolf.
Yeah.
We know Pineda really rates Wolf a lot.
He talks about him a lot.
Talks about him a lot. And I know he's very, very high on Wolf. How do you think he did yesterday? First of all, where did he line up? And how do you think he did?
With Wolf, he lined up as a 10. What he said afterwards is I think there was a different thing in mind for him, but the Moreno injury probably pushed him into play as a 10. He was all over the place, as a 10 would be in this kind of way of playing with two holding midfielders behind. He'd drift out wide. He'd go find space. He said he was intended to play winger. And it wasn't exactly clear, but the way I took it was Moreno would have been the 10. Wolf would have played as a winger, either with the first or the second group. Maybe he would have played in place of Centeno. But when Moreno couldn't go, things changed. So my biggest thing about Wolf for 2022 is, where does he play? What is his best position? Because we've seen him as a 9. We've seen him as a winger. We've seen him as a 10. We've seen him as an 8. I don't know what his position is yet. I don't know. That's what I hope to have answered by the end of the season. Like, being a utility guy for a little while is good, because you're going to get on the field. You're going to get games. You're going to get minutes. You're going to get to develop. But at some point, you got to have a spot that is yours, that you can be a starter in. I don't know where that is yet. Really smart player. Very technical. I think he reads the game very, very well. I think it's just consistently making an impact. Finishing chances, creating chances, consistently producing will take him from a promising young player to a guy that we're talking about. Yeah, you might need to find more playing time for him.
You know where I thought Wolf did a really nice job, and I understand it was a friendly, and this was now literally 2 years ago. But Wolf on the right wing with Josetu as the central attacking midfielder in Birmingham.
Yeah.
2 years ago, I thought Wolf looked very comfortable and at home on the right wing. But again, that was also a very weird lineup. I mean, Mateus Josetu's not going to be, I mean, he could be situationally, but first choice, he's not going to be a central attacking midfielder for Atlanta United in a first choice group. He can play it, but
we'll see it. We'll see it from time to time. I don't think consistently. I think it's become clear that Gonzalo really likes Josetu as an 8 or a 6, a little bit deeper, but does want him to be able to push forward when he can. If you get into a game situation, you have to move pieces around. You can put Josetu into a 10 role, and he can be effective for you.
Yeah. And I understand he has new hair.
You will like it. He's very easy to spot.
That's good. I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm serious. And sometimes, from 30,000 feet away, as we are at the Bend sometimes, Ibarra and Josetu and Heinemann can all look a little similar. Yeah. So if Josetu wants to stick with the blonde hair, I'll certainly appreciate that.
Yes. I might even chip in for the dye.
And Mile High says shoes. I'm telling you, sometimes Heinemann and Josetu will both wear the red boots. Sometimes that does happen. And sometimes they'll wear one color boots during warmups and then change during the match. Which I also really love.
Also true. GH is right. There were quite a few guys who looked a little bit, not bigger in a bad way, like bigger, like more filled out, especially the young guys.
That's really, I'm glad you brought that up. This is a very subtle thing, but I noticed, I'm doing my boards and charts and everything for Sunday, and they have quietly updated heights and weights on the club website.
Didn't know that.
And there were a few players who put on like 10 or 15 pounds here or there. And I think there was a player or two who even grew an inch or two. And Conway, I think, was one of them. In fact, I know Conway was one of them. Conway was one that I want to say he went up like 13 pounds or something like that. I know for sure he was one of them.
So it's not right. And it's muscle. It's not anything to worry about.
Oh, no, it's not 13 pounds like me. I mean, I put on 13 pounds at dinner. No, but like if you want to do a little Dick Tracy work, they're very quietly, I think they've updated some heights and weights, and that really did stand out to me when I was working on my Atlanta United board earlier in the week. That, oh wow, Jackson Conway put on 13 pounds. That's interesting. But again, in a good way. And I think it's also very important to point out that if you put on like 10 pounds of muscle between November and now, you've been working your butt off to do that. So
came in shape for sure.
Exactly. So I think that's a real credit and testament to someone like Jackson Conway for putting in that kind of work in a relatively short span of time.
Yeah, 100%. All right, 2:00 today. We got stoppage time on Twitch, twitch.tv/stoppage time929, and on Facebook, facebook.com/929. You can watch it live on either one. It'll be on Facebook after the fact. More on Atlanta United. If you guys have questions, send them Mike and I's way, and we'll get into them.
Yeah, looking forward to it. See you at 2. And
thanks, Mike.
We'll see if you have another intro for me at 2. I'm very impressed.
Oh, now you're putting pressure on me.
Yeah.
Okay.
What can Jason do in 3 hours? We're going to find out.
Oh, we'll see.
All right.
See what we come up with. Thanks, Mike.
See you, Jason.
Tom Robinson is in. Tom, I didn't hit your fancy intro. Hold on. There we go.
Wow.
Now it's official.
That is impressive. That is the best intro I've ever had straight away there. So thank you very much for that, Jason. How are you doing? How's the start to the year gone?
Good. We were talking about Atlanta United's first preseason game yesterday. 60 minutes, 2:30s against a local team, Georgia Storm. All kinds of questions about who looked good, where things are. And one of the questions we haven't gotten to today is one reason why I brought you on, Ezequiel Barco. And the reports about River Plate. Barco hasn't been in camp. Not really a surprise with all the conversation. First about Brazilian teams and the River. Seems like everything is really done when it comes to Barco going to River, according to the reports out of Argentina. I think from a River perspective, they are so aggressive right now in loading up for a Libertadores run. And the Argentine media feels like Barco could be the piece that really puts them over the top.
Yeah, it's a huge signing for River if it goes through. I mean, as you said, they've properly re-upped the squad in a way that we haven't seen for a good few seasons now. It feels like they're really going to use that Julian Alvarez money that's going to come in to bolster that squad and make a real go of it in the Libertadores. We've seen Juanfer Quintero come back. He's obviously another proven guy at this level with that star quality that can really take them to the next level. But they've also made a lot of shrewd signings to just bolster the squad. You've got players who, 6-9 months ago maybe were just finding their feet at River, but now in the last 3-4 months of the year really, got into their stride and even, the team that you look at that went out to Atletico Mineiro and the team that finished the year, and the added bonus of Marcelo Gallardo being there as well, which is obviously always a key factor. You put that all together and you're suddenly looking at a very different beast, and one that if Barco comes in, that just sprinkles even more magic dust that's already there. It's almost a question of where are you going to fit all these guys in, because you're going to be spoilt for choice, really.
Yeah, I heard you and Simon Edwards and Peter Coates on the Pinnacle South American podcast, which is a great listen. Check that out. I think it was episode 5 that debuted this week. And we've seen the Brazilian teams just dominate in the Libertadores here recently. This aggressiveness from River feels like a direct response to that of, okay, now we're going to go for this and every other trophy we can now that they got Gallardo back for another year.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. I think the Argentinian noses have been put out of joint a little bit after some years of Brazilian dominance, and I think it's a real response, as you said, a wake-up call for Argentina. Even Boca, I think, are starting to make some moves, and their teams coming together, making it look as if they're going to really be more of a challenger than they have in recent years. And you look at the Brazilian sides, there's not been too much change as of yet. Palmeiras, obviously, again, keeping their coach is going to be key, but Paulo Sousa coming in at Flamengo is going to be interesting. Obviously, that European influence there as well. And Mineiro are going to be really strong, bolstered by Godin coming in defence as well. He might be past it at the very top level, but he's still going to be able to do a job in South America. So those teams are still looking extremely strong, and you'd still imagine that they're going to be some of the favourites for the competition. But other than that, River are really putting themselves right in that that category of easily one of the favourites, and a team that I have a lot more faith in going all the way this year than maybe I did in the last year.
I think it's been interesting too, looking at River and Boca and the moves that they've made involving MLS. We've seen guys leaving Argentina and coming to Major League Soccer, and we're still seeing that. And then we'll get into Thiago Almada in a minute. The players coming from MLS to bolster these teams. I mean, besides Barco, Leandro Gonzalez Pires at River, Nicolas Figal going from Miami to Boca, Tomas Pochettino, who had started at Talleres, now going to River on loan from Austin. I think you're seeing a two-way market now that we really have never seen.
Yeah, that's definitely something that feels new and feels like a trend that's beginning to emerge. I think the inevitable thought initially was, okay, this is going to be a linear progression from MLS onto Europe, or just staying in MLS and earning a good career there. But it's interesting how there's kind of almost a mutual trading back and forth of guys who players like Figal, like Gonzalo Pires, who may have been good solid names in Argentina, going to the MLS, increasing their value, their profile, their worth, and coming back in at the very best sides. And I think even some of these young players like Barco, you could argue as well. Maybe in an ideal world he would have gone on to Europe in probably his mind and his career path that he'd set out. But maybe now you're seeing guys who are going a little bit earlier to MLS, almost treating it as like a bit of a year abroad or something like that. You might get in a university. I know certainly when I was that age, going abroad, living in Spain, living in Argentina, they're big experiences for a young person, and you can maybe understand that maybe the quality of the player is there, but whether they fit into a new country, new language, new culture, it can be a lot to take. And I don't think necessarily if you fail or succeed in MLS or vice versa makes you a bad player. I think it's just a case that maybe it's not that linear progression and more of a putting them on a level playing field of saying, yeah, it's fine to have a couple of years, come back, there might still be a chance to go on to Europe, or maybe you're just going to stay at one of the top clubs in each one of those leagues and countries. So it's a really interesting dynamic that I didn't quite see panning out that way.
Yeah, I didn't either. It feels like some of the old perceptions are dying out, not across the board. I mean, you're seeing some of the reactions from people about Almada, and what's expected for him is to come to Atlanta after the Barco move happens. You get some of the people who say, you should go straight to Europe. You should go straight to Europe. This conversation has come up with players in every country where you have this idea that they should go somewhere else, but there have to be the right offers from those other places. And for Almada, there haven't been just yet. He was linked to Marseille for a long time, but it didn't pan out. We're seeing this with Miles Robinson here in Atlanta right now. You're not hearing about the offers coming from the other side yet. You'd love to see some of these moves happen, but where it's not ready yet for MLS, for Argentina, for Brazil now, with more players coming and going with MLS as well, it feels like maybe that old school mentality of our league is here, your league is down here, is kind of going away. The business is good for all three to be able to move players between all three.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think certainly when it comes to Argentina, there's that economic necessity to sell, and it almost doesn't matter where you're going almost. But I think what's really interesting, and something that I've been discussing with friends and colleagues as well, is as much as the MLS has probably risen in terms of quality and profile and people's opinion of it, I think the expectation that we all had before is, okay, if you're a good player, you make the jump to Europe. I think now more than ever, it's harder to bridge that gap between Argentina and Europe. I think that's the bigger difference, rather than maybe the rising profile of MLS, is maybe how Argentina has fallen a bit in terms of the adaptation to go straight into a European league and start tearing it up. I think certainly going into the Premier League, there's very few examples, I think, direct from South America who've come in and had a great impact straight away. You know, we were even saying, someone like Lautaro Martinez at Inter Milan, he's doing great and he's kicking on. But this is probably one of the very, very best talents that we've seen in Argentinian football in 5 years. And it took him a little while to get going. So almost if you can keep your head above water that first year or first 6 months that you're in Europe, that should probably be seen as more of a success than maybe most people take it for. So I think it's definitely a case of MLS rising, Argentina sinking a little bit, and Europe just going to a different level in terms of, you know, the very, very top teams over there.
Yeah, it's fascinating how the market's shifting, and you know, just the business here in MLS has grown. In Argentina, you got clubs that have to sell. The pandemic has affected everybody, maybe MLS a little bit less than some others because of that stability. And you know, even Brazil, which pretty traditionally was able to send guys to Europe at all different levels of Europe all the time. Now you're seeing young Brazilian talents come to MLS in numbers we've never seen.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the bigger changes. I think the Argentinian sort of group of players who've been sort of steadily going, and there's been more of a historic link as well with you know, some of the players like Valeri and Blanco and people like that over the years who've established a really good rapport. Whereas Brazil, was a bit of more of an unknown market, but I think it's gonna go more and more that way. It's you know, the football world is diversifying, and at the end of the day, these, certainly Brazil and Argentina, are countries that are massive exporters of footballers, and you know, you can find Brazilians in almost any league in the world. So it's obviously logical that you're going to start to see more going north and going to the MLS.
We're going to get some questions from the people watching on Twitch as well that I want to jump into, but I want to ask you, for people who are maybe hearing about Thiago Almada as that starts to pop up even more. I know we've talked about him before, but what would you tell Atlanta fans about Almada as a player and what he can bring to the table?
I mean, I'm a huge fan of Almada, the footballer. He's got that stereotypical Argentinian low center of gravity, great dribbling, amazing football brain. You know, he's kind of everything that you'd expect. You know, obviously there's unhelpful comparisons to Messi. He's obviously not on that level, and no one ever will be. But he's really, really impressive. And I think more than ever, he's sort of, in the last year or so, you can see how now he's someone who runs the attack, who everything goes through him. His every move is kind of one step ahead in his mind. He already knows what he's going to do with the ball before he receives it. The way he pings crisp passes, the way he can hold off those stronger defenders. I think he's, you know, developed more into a man than just a young sort of fragile attacking midfielder. He can ride those challenges. He can under pressure, he can turn it around the corner, bring others into play. He's really got something of everything, and he's someone who I think again, the presumption is he's going to go to Atlanta there, and I think he's one of those few, a bit like Julian Alvarez, where you could say this guy, in my opinion, at least anyway, is good enough to go straight to Europe and make a move. So he feels like a real impressive signing for MLS. He's obviously, though, a couple of years older than when Barco came. You could definitely see them as sort of similar players in terms of physique, style of play. But I think he's someone who's, rather than maybe a wide forward or someone who's sort of coming in off the flanks, I think he's found his home in that central kind of number 10 role. I think he's someone who's got a bit more about him, who's got that ability to take the pressure on his shoulders and really dictate the game from an attacking point of view. And I think the fact that he's had a couple of extra years in Argentina, probably the fact the pandemic, as you said, has probably staved off a few bids from Europe. I think that's probably played in his favour in terms of getting more experience under his belt. We've seen young players leave Velas particularly at a young age, 16, 17, 18, go straight to a European club and then kind of sink without a trace. Whereas I think the fact that he's had that extra time in Argentina, he's had that extra game time experience in Libertadores, Sudamericana, the league, I think that's played in his advantage. And I feel like, especially the way we've seen other young players maybe struggle to adapt in MLS, I feel like he's more ready than he would have been 2 years ago. Obviously, there's still a lot of maturing to do, but I give him a much better chance of going in and making more of an instant impact than, say, Barco, for example.
I want to ask you a couple of things about some other moves that have happened before we get some questions from the Twitch pitch. Julian Alvarez to Manchester City. This had been talked about for a while. He's going to stay at River for at least the first half of the year. Sounds like he could stay for the whole year. What are you expecting for Alvarez long-term at City?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting one. I was on a Manchester United podcast a few weeks back when they were heavily linked with him. And I even said on that, I was like, yeah, it feels more like a Manchester City kind of move because he's exactly the kind of profile of player they've tended to go for. I mean, obviously in recent years with the Grealish transfer, they've obviously gone for big money there. But typically you've seen them go for these guys for maybe 20, 30, 40 million who aren't ready-made stars, who aren't people with a huge profile who'll come in, they'll be part of that team. And I think Alvarez kind of fits that bill in terms of someone who's a versatile striker, very intelligent, very mobile, someone who obviously has had great success playing through the middle with River Plate this year, but has played on the wing, has played as a support striker, has played as a false nine. He's someone who can occupy a lot of roles. And the fact that as soon as Ferran Torres left Man City, even if City can play without a striker and still win the league, the fact that there's just a gaping opportunity there to bring someone in on a pretty low risk move, someone who's not going to expect to play every week as well, who can learn his trade, make contributions, have some great service and be around some of the best players in the world. It makes sense. The only obviously downside to it from Alvarez's point of view is it's going to be hard to make your first move to go to that level of tactical complexity and discipline and all those kind of aspects, massive expectations, not playing every week. Is he going to be able to rise to that challenge? I think maybe you could see the argument for him going to a top half club in any European league, Sevilla, Fiorentina, even a good old Aston Villa, for example, and and sort of getting more game time, which I think is maybe the one thing that you'd question the move. But the fact he's staying at River, I mean, great deal for them. They get a load of money guaranteed coming in, and they get their star man for another, as you said, at least 6 months. But who knows? With the World Cup in November, there could be that temptation of saying, well, we're going well in the Libertadores. Can we hang on to him for another 3 or 4 months? So I think it works well for all parties, really. And I'm really interested to see how it goes, because on one hand, I get the logic. On the other hand, better players than him have come in and failed to make the grade. So I think it's I think it makes more sense than certainly the Manchester United links. Fair play. It's going to be really fascinating, and it's going to be great to see if he can, fill the big shoes left by Sergio Aguero. So yeah, very, very interesting next year or so for Julian Alvarez.
I love that somebody unearthed on Alvarez's Twitter a picture he had taken as a kid with Aguero and published that, because I mean, he is going to be seen as that replacement, fairly or unfairly. He's going to be, linked to that. It's a big year for Alvarez, who will be part of the Argentine national team. He'll be part of the national team in these upcoming qualifiers, probably a part of the team at the World Cup, could be starting at the World Cup. And City could get him back to start 23 in that January window if he stays the whole year at River on loan and goes to the World Cup, and could be getting a player coming off of a good tournament.
Yeah, exactly. I think you can certainly see why both national team and Man City could see the value in allowing him to be in surroundings that he's comfortable with. The confidence he's showing in the second half of last year was incredible, and it'd be a shame to sort of stem that flow at the moment. And yeah, as you said, could be a lovely little addition halfway through a season just to get that extra push, that extra competition. But again, you could see him doing a job to sort of settle into the squad. It's not really going to affect his chances of getting in the national team. He's going to get in the national team whether he's at River Plate or whether he's a squad player at Manchester City. That's just a guarantee. He's always been someone who's been seen by the national team hierarchy as a player to integrate into the main team. He was in the under-20s. I think whenever you saw him coming through, you got that feel of this is a guy who is a very modern European forward. He's smart, he's mobile, he does everything you want. He can slot into all kinds of different roles. So I think there's always been that feeling that however well he does in Argentina, he was always going to be quite a nice fit for a transfer for Europe, and someone who can play with those elite players at national team level. So yeah, it's looking like a real exciting signing, and certainly even 6 months ago, I don't think I would have expected him to be going to a club of quite this magnitude. So hats off to him.
Yeah, absolutely. He's had an incredible year. Questions from the Twitch pitch. Question about Alan Velasco and going to Dallas. Looks like for around 7 million, 7.5, with another almost 2 in potential add-ons. Velasco and just his overall level where he is, what his ceiling is in your mind.
The ceiling's huge. I really think he's up there with players like Almada as some of the most exciting players to come through in the last year or two. He really burst onto the scene about just over a year and a half ago maybe, and he was just an absolute beast in terms of the level this 17-year-old was showing and scoring a beautiful brace against River. He then had a little bit of a dip to begin the year, but in the last tournament he's done well in a really difficult situation at Independiente where they have no money. They're just trusting the youngsters, and even though I think he only scored 1 goal, he was up there in terms of the assists, and his numbers were very impressive. I think he was the highest dribbler in the entire league as well, which is pretty impressive for such a young guy. And again, for me he's the most exciting talent to come out of Independiente since Kun Agüero, and he's got again all those attributes that you would imagine for your typical pibe from the Potrero. He's got that low center of gravity. He's more of I would say he's more of a forward than someone like Almada, even more than Barco as well. I think he's someone who's, you could see him in a front three rather than as more of a number 10. I think he's maybe not an out-and-out striker, but certainly someone who belongs more in that very, very final third of the pitch. And, he's part of a really exciting generation that came through at the under-17 level for the national team. A lot of the kids coming through at Boca right now. You also got Matias Palacios, who's at Basel in Switzerland. A really, really exciting batch there that Pablo Aimar did very well with. And he's someone who's massively rated. And I think as well to get him for under 10 million is an absolute steal. All the questions of whether such a young guy can make an instant impact will be there, given some of the examples that we were talking about earlier on in the discussion. It might be a case that does this move come a bit too soon for him? That's something that we just can't guess how he's going to adapt. But in terms of potential, certainly I'd be putting him in that top 5 young Argentinian talents, along with maybe not quite as high as Alvarez and Almada, but certainly in that sort of bracket of 3 to 5. So certainly, if I was a Dallas fan, I'd be getting really excited about this guy.
Makes sense. I thought he was a little bit different kind of player than Almada and what he would bring to the table. So that makes total sense. Question from Modaflow about the U20 Copa Libertadores coming up. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, it's always a really fascinating league. It doesn't always get maybe quite as much press as you'd expect. But yeah, there's some exciting teams in there. Generally speaking, if you're looking at U20 tournaments, I hope you've also been checking out the Copinha as well, which Palmeiras have just won. Endrick, the young star of that, who's only 15 years old, but absolutely amazing talent. the levels he's showing against people several years older than him are really impressive. So yeah, the under 20 Libertadores, you maybe don't quite know what you're going to get until you're actually in the latter stages of it, and there's some teams who'll be blowing other teams away, but it's always an interesting one, because I think you can look at that, and then usually that's quite a good indicator of maybe some teams to watch a couple of years down the line. We've seen it with Nacional in the past, Talleres, teams that have gone on to have more success with their senior team. So I think it's always an interesting one to watch, and there'll definitely be some names that probably none of us have heard of right now who are the next big thing in about 3 or 4 months' time.
Yeah, there's always those young talents who come through and then burst into first teams out of the U20 Libertadores. Other moves with guys coming to MLS from South America. Who are some of the players who have grabbed your attention outside of the potential with Almada and Velasco that we've talked about?
Yeah, well, I think the obvious one is Facu Torres, going from Peñarol to Orlando. Again, someone who's lit up the Sudamericana and the Uruguayan league, someone who's, again, I wouldn't have been surprised if he'd made the jump to Europe. It's a big money move, so there's going to come a lot of pressure with that as well. But he formed a really good understanding with Canario Alvarez up front. The two premier talents coming out of Peñarol, and I think the thing to get really excited about as well is the kind of impact he made at the Copa America, coming off the bench. Straight away. It was like, okay, yeah, this guy can contribute already. He can mix it. I think beforehand you'd seen Facundo Pelistri being the premier talent coming out of Peñarol and getting that big move to Man United, and he's just fallen by the wayside in comparison to Torres. So I think this is probably more of a sensible move for his development, and yeah, in theory it's one that should be really exciting, and definitely the big other name alongside the Argentinians that I'm really intrigued to see how it goes.
Torres, I'm curious where he's going to line up for Orlando, because they've lost Daryl Dike, they've lost Nani. Torres has mainly been out on the left, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay.
So sort of drifting in, he's not an out and out winger,
right,
but he's someone who will sort of station himself on the left and sort of work his way inside and sort of he's someone who can operate in multiple areas, more of a central role as well. But yeah, someone who at this stage in his career, I think, more of a wide forward winger, but not your traditional chalk on the boots kind of winger.
Yeah, makes total sense. Orlando is going to be interesting with some of the moves they're making. Looks like they have a number 9 coming in from Europe, where that would put Torres on one side and Sylvester van der Vaart, Dutch winger, on the other side. So they could have some really different personalities with their group.
Yeah, definitely.
One more before we get to World Cup qualifiers, because I got to get your take on some of that. Diego Valocious, what do you think the next move is for him?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I mean, he's definitely can perform at a higher level than Talleres. He's consistently been one of the best players in the division for a while now, and I think maybe Europe would be a surprise. So I feel like in the Americas would be a better fit. He can go in, I think, at any top level. I wouldn't be surprised if a big Brazilian side took him, or an MLS side took him, or Boca or River went for him. He's someone who's getting game time, or getting called up at least to the Colombian national team, which goes quite a long way, because Talleres is okay. It's a big provincial club in Argentina, but it doesn't have a huge profile abroad, and the fact that he's getting recognition there is a sure sort of sign that he could definitely do it at level. I mean, certainly if I was advising MLS clubs and you were looking for a guy who's not going to cost the earth, he's not at one of the big clubs, he's going to be a bit easier to extricate, then Valocious would be right up there as one of my top targets. So yeah, I mean, if I was an MLS club, I'd definitely be looking at him.
Yeah, he's somebody that I've kind of expected his name to pop up with the MLS, kind of scouting down in Argentina, and I haven't really seen it. I haven't really seen any potential moves for him yet.
Yeah, it's surprising because he's consistently been doing it. He's a threat. He could do it on a bigger level, and yeah, I think whereas you can understand why maybe the top clubs in Argentina don't quite have the buying power to get him. But yeah, I very, very shocked that he's not gone to a Brazilian or an MLS club, because you'd think he'd be a really good fit in both of those leagues as well.
As the leader of the Pulga Rodriguez fan club here in the United States, dreams have been dashed of him coming to MLS. He's going to be back at Cologne, which I'm really excited about. What do you think about Cologne in the Libertadores this year?
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how they do. The fact that Pulga's coming back just gives it a whole extra dimension. I was a bit worried that when he left, there might be quite a significant drop off from in the second half of the year, but they actually managed to get a relatively reasonable finish in the end, and they were pretty competitive. The fact that Eduardo Dominguez has now left and gone to Independiente, which, okay, it's one of the grandes, but I'm not too sure. When you've got Libertadores football and Pulga coming back, it seems a strange one to me.
I was
definitely, definitely. Colón, I would say have got a better squad than Independiente right now. And I think what's going to be key as well is if they can keep hold of Facundo Farias, because he's a really exciting, raw, bull in a china shop type player who had such a great relationship with Pulga. So it's a nice nostalgic element to it, and there's a lot of good, solid players there that I think will certainly give a lot of sides a run for their money. They could definitely get a little bit of a run there if they get a kind draw in the groups there. So that's definitely one of the storylines to watch there. I do think there's not maybe any outstanding candidates outside of River when you look at from the Argentinians, but there's teams that could make a dent and could all get to a knockout stage. But it's still a long way to go before we get to that.
World Cup qualifiers. We know Brazil's in. We know Argentina's in. Ecuador's in a really good spot in third. Do you think they get enough out of this window to feel secure going into the last one?
Yeah, I think it's I think more to do with the sort of maybe the weakness of the teams challenging them around them is probably going to see them over the line.
Right.
I mean, the key thing for me is they just got to make sure they don't lose to Peru, because you're denying Peru points, and then that's going to be enough to keep them at bay and think, we're not going to slip down. Colombia have got some difficult games against Peru and Argentina, so the way that they've not been scoring any goals doesn't give you huge hope that they're going to put 2 wins together. And then, there's a lot of teams duking it out amongst themselves. So I think, provided they don't lose the next 2 games, I think they can pretty much be, booking their hotels in Doha.
So if that's 1, 2, 3, you've got one more automatic spot and then the playoff spot. I feel like it's up for grabs totally with the people who are left. Who do you think right now has the inside track to getting the automatic spot?
That is the $1 million question, really. I think Colombia, I'd be surprised if they dropped out of the qualification automatically. I mean, they might finish 5th, but I think they've at least got a solid defense that I can't see them losing and losing ground on rivals. I think they've got enough there. There's enough quality. All it needs is to turn a couple of those nils into a 1-0, and they should be all right. But a couple of really big games for them, and that they could be the next crisis team if this round doesn't go very well for them. Peru and Chile have both come off the back of excellent results, but it's time for them to back those results up. They need to show that they can beat their direct rivals, and if it goes well, then suddenly those 2 teams are suddenly out of nowhere looking like they could be a shoe-in, and obviously Uruguay are probably the most fascinating out of all the teams, because they're coming off a horrendous run of 4 pretty heavy defeats for the most part as well. They've got rid of Tavares after 15 odd years. That's a huge roll of the dice right now, and it could work. I mean, I think that if Tavares had stayed in, they probably would have got enough points out of the remaining fixtures they've got anyway, because I think that will be the key factor for them, is they've got some all right fixtures. But if this disrupts things, or you could argue they need a bit of disruption to get a kick up the behind there. But I think there's a real potential for them to be the big casualties. Even though I think they'll still make it. Personally, I think as much as it sounds pretty boring and hedging my bets with the favourites, I still think Uruguay and Colombia are going to make it. But it's going to be tight, and I think certainly if it comes down to that final match between Uruguay and Chile, that could be the decisive game for fifth place. And don't write out Bolivia just yet.
I was about to bring them up.
Yeah, you read my mind. So I mean, if they can get a result away at Venezuela, which is unlikely given their away record in general, but if you're going to get an away result against anyone, Venezuela right now is probably one of your better bets.
Right.
And then at home against Chile, again, that is a game that they'll fancy every single home fixture. So they could be a real, cat amongst the pigeons, or at the very least, they could play a massive role in the fortunes of some of the other nations that are out there. So, yeah, Bolivia is one that I've got a cheeky eye on, even though I've learned in the past never to be putting too many eggs in that basket.
But you're right. I mean, there's 4 games left. They go to Venezuela, which is the road game you could expect to get something out of. You get Chile at home. That's one of the teams you're fighting with. The last round is where it gets tough, is they go to Colombia, which, I mean, they're going to have to play their way in if they go to Colombia and get anything. And then they host Brazil, even a qualified Brazil, but you host Brazil in the last day. Oof.
Yeah, that's the one sort of game that you think, well, surely they won't be winning that home game. But a lot of people go up to altitude and struggle, and especially if it's the final game, you've got nothing to play for. You've obviously got pride, and you've obviously got the superior players. But there's nothing to say that Bolivia don't pull off a result there or even get a draw. So you kind of think, well, if they can get 6 points from the home games, they need to get something from the Venezuela game, even if it's just a point. Who knows? That could be enough to get them in there. They won't get anything from Colombia away, I'll tell you that now. But it's stranger things have happened, and the way that Colombia are struggling to find the back of the net. Again, it's not a bad time to play Colombia. So Bolivia could. I mean, it would just be the craziest of stories if we see them back at the World Cup after so long.
Oh, it'd be wild. These games are going to be fun. There's 4 games left in South America. We got 6 games left in CONCACAF, so we're just over halfway through. These qualifiers, there's a lot of storylines here. There's a lot of storylines, and there's a lot of young talents that have an opportunity to kind of plant their flag and get noticed for big moves coming up too.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's what's going to be interesting about certainly the Argentinian and Brazilian games. Obviously there's not too much riding on them, but Argentina are going to want to keep that winning or unbeaten record going. Yep. It's a real good chance for them to experiment with players because it's easy to think that, oh yeah, Brazil, Argentina, they walk qualification every time, but Argentina have been scrapping up until the last minute for quite a few occasions in recent years. So this is a strange luxury for them to try out some options. I'm hoping we'll see some Emi Buendia getting a bit of game time there. Who knows? And okay, there maybe is not loads of super young players, but I mean, again, even looking at the Brazil squad, you've got the chance of Anthony, Vinicius, Rodrigo. There's a wealth of young talent in those squads to be taking advantage of the fact that there's not much to play for, and playing for a spot in one of those coveted places at the World Cup potentially. So it's there's reasons to follow everything. As much as that 4th to 9th place, there's only 4 points separating them, so it's an absolute bun fight there at the moment. But everywhere you look, there's interesting subplots and plots at this stage. So it's going to be absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, in Atlanta, we mentioned to Venezuela with Joseph Martinez, with Ronald Hernandez there. Hernandez is starting to become a fixture with the Venezuelan national team. Just interesting storylines all over the place. What do you have coming up over the next week or two? I know you've got the Pinnacle podcast out now. You guys have done your Golazo 50, right, for Golazo Argentino?
That's right, yeah. So, I mean, pretty much every year, we had a little break last year for obvious reasons, but yeah, we always like to put together the 50 what we think are the 50 best young talents in Argentinian football under the age of 23.
Okay.
So it's kind of it's not based on who's necessarily had the best year. It's a mixture of what their potential is, how well they have been doing. There's a lot of things that go into it, and we really struggled to get it down to 50. There were so many players that could have made it in there. So we're counting that down all this week. There should be a piece up for Y Scouts, I think has just gone up on the Uruguay team. If you're wanting to read a bit more about, what do they need to do? Is this roll of the dice going to work, and how things maybe look under Alonso? So that's another one to check out. And lots going on as South American football ramps back up again after the winter break.
I need a quick tease on the Golasso 50. There's two players that are, and I'm going to upset our River fans here. We have a couple resident River fans in the Twitch pitch. I've got to ask about Boca. One, because he's played really, really well in these friendlies so far. Ceballos.
Yep, Ceballos. He's someone who I think if we'd done the list maybe a week or two later might have been a little bit higher up the list. But I think what he's shown, I think he might be the one player at Boca to really, really keep an eye out for. But yeah, he definitely gets in there. Okay. And I think again, he'll be someone who in next year's list is going to be probably a lot higher. So there's a big Boca contingent. There's a lot of young players there.
There's
to
a younger one that I wanted to ask you about, Valentin Barco, who I've had a chance to see a little bit that I really like.
Yeah, he's also snuck in there as well.
Okay.
Again, both Ceballos and Barco are more in there on certainly they've had a great year with the reserves, but as much on potential as well. So there's some players on there who might not have had loads of first team football or might have gone to Europe, struggled to get game time, but are still kind of hanging around the list. But yeah, Barco is someone who, mark my words, he is going to be on that list every year now for about 5 or 6 years, as long as we do that list, because for me, he's the most exciting left back since Juan Pablo Sorin. I think he's the real deal, and that's a hill I'm willing to die on.
I'm right there with you. I will defend the hill with you as well. Golasso 50 is a must read. We'll be sharing it from here, and I'm sure we'll be talking about it as well. It's always great work. It's always great talking to you. Thanks for bearing with my internet issues that kept wanting to kick me out.
That's quite all right. It was worth it for that intro. Maybe that took too much juice out of the internet there.
Maybe it did. Maybe it drained my internet with that intro. Tom, we'll talk to you again soon. And hopefully, if we don't have any more variants, I'll be able to get over to Scotland and see you in person.
Yeah, fingers crossed. You're always welcome over here, and looking forward to the next chat, whether it be over the internet or in person.
Excellent. Thank you, Tom. Appreciate it.
Cheers. Bye.
Make sure you're following Tom Robbo 89 on your social media platforms. I'll take a few final questions. I feel like I owe it to you after my internet decided to fight with me during that interview. I'm really thankful Tom bared with me there. A couple of things that have happened during the show. Paul Arriola to Dallas is done. He will be bought down, so he won't be a designated player. That had been reported before. Dallas is sitting on so much allocation money, and they have the discretionary TAM that it appears they're going to use here, but they have so much allocation money that they can make these things work. When you sell a bunch of players, and Justin Che was the latest one to go to Hoffenheim, who Hoffenheim saying lots of good things about Justin Che. Maybe he'll have an opportunity to fight for time a little bit sooner than we thought. When you sell guys, you get allocation money. And I think we're starting to see this offseason in MLS more of a concerted strategy and conversation about allocation money. And look, there's going to be some narratives that I think are behind the times. So this idea about trading guys within the league versus selling them and how you can't do that. That's not a smart move. Yeah, it is. You look at what DC can do with Arriola here. They've got a bunch of allocation money now, and they had cap issues. Now they can better their team in a much better way than they could have if they had sold him. Bringing in allocation money within trades in the league, but also Dallas' strategy of developing guys and selling them on, converting money into allocation money. It gives you more cap room. It gives you more ability to go out and do things in the market and within the market inside the league. It's really, really important. So I love that that's becoming more of a strategic thing that we're seeing MLS teams do. Thomas Chacon has been bought out of his contract in Minnesota, just never settled in Minnesota. I don't think he ever really got an opportunity. I don't think he honestly fit the profile of what Adrian Heath wanted in terms of a young central midfielder, a number 10. He feels like more of one of those throwbacks number 10s that you're going to have guys play for him, around him. And that doesn't ever seem to be something that Adrian Heath would embrace. So Thomas Chacon, his contract has been bought out. We'll see what MLS can do to move him on. We saw this happen with Pellegrini last year with Miami. They had to do it to get cap compliant. We have a situation with Ulises Segura in Austin. His contract was bought out. The MLS buyout, the official MLS buyout, all it does is you get one of them per year. It takes the player off of the team's cap and roster. They're still under an MLS contract. MLS has to then try to move that player on, find somewhere for them to go. So curious to see where Segura ends up. Curious to see if another MLS team looks at Chacon. Really talented young player, but he has stunted his development with his move to Minnesota. All right, final questions. Throw them in. Kefsey starts us off. Do Franco and Campbell have the love needed to shut down the Rui Diaz's of the league based on 30 minutes of a scrimmage, or should we be patient? Go with the latter, Kefsey. Patience is good. One, it's going to be Franco and Miles Robinson as your two center backs. Robinson away with the U.S. men's national team. They didn't really get tested enough yesterday to even give them a grade, in my opinion. I thought Campbell was very bold in stepping up high and pressing, which was good to see. Didn't play timidly in any way. Looked to be in sync with Franco. Gazan, very vocal in organizing things with Allen, with George, with the outside backs, with the holding midfield. I don't have any concerns about George Campbell if he had to play 34 games as a starter in MLS. I think he's got the ability. I think he's shown that quality. And Alan Franco can be one of the best center backs in the league. So, and Miles Robinson already is. So, I mean, I think you're good at center back all the way around the board. But Campbell's ready. If for whatever reason Campbell has to play 34 games, I really truly believe that he is ready to do that. He can take that on. He's got that ability. And I've said it before, and it was my hot take about a month ago. 2026 World Cup, I think George Campbell can absolutely be a factor for the United States. I think he's got that kind of potential and ceiling, still developing every day. One of the big takeaways for me, I said it in our podcast yesterday, Noah Cobb at 16, his performance yesterday, you couldn't have picked out the 16-year-old on the field if you didn't know who he was. Really good, really sure of himself, good defensively, good on the ball, can be better on the ball. Gonzalo Pineda kind of lit up when I asked him about Noah Cobb and about the guys coming up from the academy. The work that the academy has done, and I know there are people who want to create narratives, which is absolutely a waste of time, about Atlanta's academy and what they've developed. You're seeing quality come through in big ways. Wiley signing a homegrown deal. The kids we've seen in the academy, Noah Cobb at 16, he's going to be in line for a potential homegrown deal. David Mejia, Johnny Fortune playing with Trinidad. Not every player from academy shouldn't always be graded on do they develop 10 out of 10s. Not many academies worldwide develop 10 out of 10s. How many pros are you developing? What kind of players are you developing? The work that the academy has put in across the board here has been really impressive. And Noah Cobb's performance yesterday is a prime example of it. A prime example of it. Yeah, Abby, it was cool because, I mean, I was sitting there talking to Jarrett and John watching Cobb, like, yes, he's killing it today. He's great. And I wanted to ask Pineda about it. And I generally hang back in those kind of conversations because I get sometimes ahead of broadcasts and we get to do some other interviews with Gonzalo. So I'm not trying to take anybody's time. But I wanted to ask him and it didn't get asked. So I asked him about Cobb and the academy, and like his eyes lit up a little bit. It was very cool to see. Guys like Pineda who have come through and had successful careers of their own, they know the work that goes in to get there from a player's perspective. But they also know the work that coaches put in with them to get there and get to that next level. And they highlight it. And I think Gonzalo highlighting everybody at the club, whether it's his assistants, whether it's Ryan Alexander, who we talked about yesterday on the sports science side of things, the performance side of things, the academy, what Jack Collison's doing with the twos, all of that is critical to creating a functioning club and having guys come through the chain. So very, very cool. Yeah, he seemed happy to talk about Cobb and the academy. He's like, did you see it? Did you see him play? I'm like, oh yeah, I was excited about watching Noah in that performance. He was better than I expected. Okay, good stuff. I'm gonna finish up here. We should invest in a bingo board. Mortal Man? Yeah, we can get a bingo board. I need a bingo board. Let's see. Yeah, we talked about the scrimmage. There's about a 45-minute podcast on our SDH network. You can access that through your favorite podcatcher. You can go to soccerdownhere.net and scroll through the archives there. You can go to our page on Spreaker and listen to it. We got into some detail on guys, individuals from Atlanta United who played well, Storm players. I didn't have a Storm roster, which I hated. I knew a couple of guys. I knew Camden Chupa, for example. I thought that was Pickrell in goal, but I wasn't 100% sure. So I was kind of like, I think it's him, but I'm not sure. In general, we went into a lot of detail there. So please check that out for sure. And it's up there. We talked about it a little bit earlier today, too, in the first 30 minutes of this show that you'll be able to go back and watch on Twitch, or you'll be able to listen to as a podcast here coming up after I edit my disappearance there during Tom's interview. Oh, Binho. I have seen that. Sorry. Thank you, Mortal Man. Yes. It's interesting. I've seen a little bit of the videos of Binho. It's not quite like Subbuteo, which I played as a kid, and I had like Subbuteo figures and a little stadium for Subbuteo. It's a little bit more of like flicking with your fingers, truly, the ball, and it's almost like billiards in some ways with the little sticks in there. It's interesting. Yes, I do want to try to actually play that because I'd never heard of it, and I've seen it pop up, I think, on my Instagram. Maybe we will invest in it. Maybe we will have it at some of our live shows. We won't have it for Sunday. Not quite paper football, Jason Nix, but it's along those lines. All about some paper football back in the day, too. Definitely that. Don't do an Irish car bomb every time I speak in tongues, Domer. Please don't, because I get excited often and I speak in tongues, and I don't want you people to pass out from doing Irish car bombs when I start speaking in tongues. Please don't do that. I beg of you not to do that, because we'll have a game where we have one of my favorite referees on it at some point this season, and I will speak in tongues. I'm sorry, it'll happen. I can make no guarantees that it won't. That's going to do it for us today. Thanks for all of the guests today. Dylan Butler, Mike Conti, Tom Robinson, Jarrett Smith in the first half hour. We've got stoppage time at 2:00. That is coming up on twitch.tv/stoppage time929 and on the 929 The Game Facebook page, facebook.com/929 The Game. That's where it will be archived. Hopefully the audio version will go up as well on your podcatchers under the Off the Woodwork folder. We'll be back tomorrow morning, normal time, normal show, 9:05. Be back Friday morning, normal time, normal show. Sunday, I know the game is already sold out at the Turner Soccer Complex at the University of Georgia in Athens, but you can watch the stream on ATLUTD.com/live. And then afterwards, you can come join us at Authentic Brewing on the north side of Athens, just down from the normal town part of town. Get there early. Should be a big crowd. Darren Eels is going to hang out with us early in the show. Mike Conti is going to come by and hang out with us. Me and John will be doing one of our SDH live shows. Scott Flood of the Flood Project has been working hard on getting everything in line for this one. We'll be live on Twitch from 3 to 5. The U.S.-Canada game will be going on as well, and we'll be reacting to it because it'll be on right in front of us. So that's all on Sunday. Busy weekend in the SDH universe. Hopefully we'll see some of y'all in person over in Athens. But we'll see you here in a couple of hours for stoppage time. Thanks for hanging out. Mucha plata, y'all.